Mount Kilimanjaro versus the Everest Base Camp Trek. Two of the world's most iconic mountain treks. One, an epic summit of Africa's highest peak, and the other a spectacular journey into the shadow of Mount Everest. But which one is right for you? In this video, we will carefully break down and compare their key differences, from their natural beauty, highlights, difficulty levels, accommodation, cost, and more. We will then conclude by offering our personal expert recommendations and advise on which trek we feel is better suited to certain kinds of people. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get going. Natural beauty. Let's begin by saying that both of these adventures are drop-dead gorgeous. These are two of the most iconic mountain treks found anywhere in the world, and for very good reasons. But how do they stack up? The landscapes seen along the Everest Base Camp Trek are more immense and, in our opinion, more visually striking. But no surprises considering where you are in the world. Colossal towers of rock and snowy peaks rise vertically all around you, and the mountains cut impossible shapes on the horizon, with many topping out at over 8,000 meters. It's pure magic. And because you're journeying through a mountain range, each day offers new panoramas and changing geography. There are new mountains to see, rivers to cross, valleys to climb. Unlike on Kilimanjaro, where the views of course change, but are characterized predominantly by the mountain on one side and the endless African plains on the other. But while the scenery on Mount Kilimanjaro may be less diverse and visually extreme, it offers its own unique charms and profound beauty. You're climbing the tallest freestanding mountain on Earth, so the views on offer are more expansive and infinite. You're not swallowed up in the environment the way that you are on the EBC trek, but instead you stand tall above Africa with the world beneath you, looking out towards Mount Meru and an otherwise endlessly flat horizon. It's absolutely breathtaking and sets the stage for night after night of fiery sunsets, an experience that is largely absent from the EBC trek, where the sun often disappears quickly behind the mountains. The plant life is also more vibrant and varied on Mount Kilimanjaro too. Beginning in subtropical rainforest, you then ascend into a gorgeous moorland, followed by a harsh and unforgiving alpine desert, and then into a barren Arctic zone that's home to some beautiful glaciers. So you really feel the climate and vegetation constantly evolving as you journey up the mountain. The Everest Base Camp Trek is more temperate in comparison and only showcases two distinct types of climate rather than the 5 found on Mount Kilimanjaro. It's also worth considering that Mount Kilimanjaro is near perfect wilderness. There's no electricity or running water on the mountain, no villages, hotels, restaurants, or souvenir shops like you find in Nepal. You camp outside under the stars and live off the supplies brought with you. There's something rather romantic and serene about it all. To conclude here, beauty is very subjective. Some people are more drawn to the spectacular extreme mountainscapes and changing scenery of the Everest Base Camp Trek, while others are more enchanted by the sweeping views and sunsets, varied plant life, and wilderness that Kilimanjaro offers. It really comes down to the individual. One thing is for certain though, you cannot go wrong with either on this front. They are both beautiful with a capital B. Highlights. First and foremost, let's make one clear distinction. Climbing Mount Kilimanjaro involves a mountain summit, whereas the EBC trek does not. On the EBC trek, you hike to the world's most famous base camp instead, the iconic departure point for expeditions to Mount Everest. So their objectives and climax feel quite different. In our opinion, the climactic moment on Mount Kilimanjaro feels more profound and euphoric as an experience. Reaching Uhuru Peak as the sun rises above the surrounding African plains is extraordinary. You are higher than every other person on the entire African continent, and on a clear day you can see for hundreds of miles in every direction. And it was more challenging to get there, so the outpour of ecstasy and emotion is a few notches higher. The major highlight on the EBC trek is Everest Base Camp itself. The camp is fascinating, especially during springtime when it's crowded with mountaineers and buzzing with activity. The views surrounding it are breathtaking, although do note that you can't actually see the summit of Mount Everest from here. The best views usually come a day after when hiking up Kala Patthar, which dazzles with unobstructed views across Mount Everest and offers one of the most iconic mountaineering experiences in the world, period. But as we said, in our opinion, Mount Kilimanjaro edges out the EBC trek in terms of that pinnacle moment and grander sense of accomplishment. Aside from this, however, the EBC trek is richer and more diverse in secondary highlights. While Kilimanjaro offers several geographical marvels such as the Fort Vangla Glacier, Barranco Wall and Lava Tower, Everest amazes with both geography and local culture. Icy rivers, gorges and glaciers give way to lofty suspension bridges, ancient villages and stone temples, where you gain a beautiful insight into the culture of the local Sherpa people and their way of life. To summarize, in our opinion, Mount Kilimanjaro offers the bigger and better climactic highlight, while the EBC trek wins in terms of offering greater variety through the entire journey. Again, it's really down to you and what you're looking for. Accommodation. On the EBC trek, you stay in what are known as tea houses, which are independent, often family-run lodges in small villages or settlements along the trail. They're basic but cozy, and usually consist of twin bedrooms upstairs with a communal space cum dining room downstairs. This is where people eat, chat, and play cards besides a crackling fire. You sleep in your sleeping bag on a thin mattress in an unheated room at night. Amenities usually include charging sockets, very basic internet, hot showers, cooked food, running water, and toilets. However, as you climb higher, these facilities become more primitive, with showers and hot water in particular not always a given above 4,000 meters. Mount Kilimanjaro, on the other hand, is a lot more rustic by far. There are no guest houses, hotels, or even basic infrastructure like running water or electricity, so you will camp and live out in nature. You will sleep in a tent on a mat inside a big puffy sleeping bag. Eat fresh fruit prepared by your mountain cook under the open sky or in a communal tent. Go to the bathroom in a portable chemical toilet and wash yourself with a bucket of warm water and a wet cloth. The one exception to this is the Marangu route, the only one of the 7 Kilimanjaro routes that offers beds in basic wooden communal mountain huts. However, we strongly recommend against this option for a variety of reasons. Feel free to watch our Kilimanjaro routes video to delve deeper and understand why. Evidently, on Mount Kilimanjaro, you won't have access to many of the modern conveniences that you will find on the Everest Base Camp Trek. The level of relative comfort is therefore higher in Nepal. But on the other hand, you feel a lot more connected with your surroundings and the natural environment on Kilimanjaro. Neither accommodation option is necessarily better or worse, since you can't really compare camping with tea houses. They each have their own charms and quirks and provide a very unique, memorable experience. So again, it's really down to the individual preference and taste. Make no mistake about it, both Kilimanjaro and the Everest Base Camp Trek are difficult. For the average person, they will likely push the body and mind to new limits. But both are still very doable. Thousands of people of all ages, experiences, and abilities complete them each year. And if you have a reasonable level of fitness and perseverance, you will be in a great position to succeed. But how do the two adventures compare? Most people who have done both treks say that Mount Kilimanjaro is the more difficult challenge overall. Here are the two reasons why. Summit Day. Summit Day on Mount Kilimanjaro is more difficult than anything you will face on the EBC trek, and by quite some margin. It's a 1,200 meter uphill climb to the top, beginning at nighttime to ensure that you reach Uhuru Peak in time for sunrise. You walk with flashlights in icy conditions in thin air, so you really need to dig deep. In total, it's about an 8-hour uphill climb to the summit, followed by another 6 to 8 hours back down to your overnight campsite, so it's a real blockbuster of a day. Many people cry when they reach Uhuru Peak, and for good reason. The reward is just spectacular, and the sense of accomplishment is truly life-changing for many. By comparison, the toughest day on the Everest Base Camp Trek is only a 400-meter elevation gain to Kala Patthar, with around 8 hours of hiking in total from start to finish. Still very, very tough at this altitude, but a different kettle of fish. The second reason why Kilimanjaro is considered more difficult is the speed of your ascent. You reach high altitude more quickly on Kilimanjaro. Within 2 or 3 days, you have already broken beyond 4,000 meters. This fast rate of ascent places greater demand on the body and shortens the time you have to acclimatize effectively to the altitude. The Everest Base Camp Trek, on the other hand, is a more gradual climb. These two factors ultimately lead to fewer climbers successfully reaching the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro than those who make it to Everest Base Camp. So do your research, but don't panic. While yes, they do differ in difficulty, remember that neither are technical climbs, and that both are considered amongst the most accessible high-altitude treks in the world. Each year we take clients young and old to each of them, and they have the time of their lives. By the way, for anybody seeking a more complete look and understanding of either of these treks, we've dropped a link in the description to our Ultimate Nepal Trekking and Mount Kilimanjaro PDF guides. They're completely free and offer a depth of detail and knowledge that we simply cannot cover in a short video. From physical preparation, critical safety advice, information on visas and trekking insurance, to a complete packing list. We've popped 2 links in the description for those of you interested. We hope it can help. Seasons. In theory, you can climb Mount Kilimanjaro and the Everest Base Camp Trek whenever you like, as trails remain open year-round. However, some months are better than others, with large seasonal differences in temperatures, rainfall, and visibility. Peak seasons for each trek occur at different points in the year, without much overlap. Mount Kilimanjaro is best climbed during the 2 dry seasons, anywhere between mid-December and March, or between mid-June and October, where you're most likely to enjoy the brightest, driest, and most stable weather conditions. In comparison, the Everest Base Camp Trek is best climbed between late March to mid-May, the spring, and between late September to November, autumn. Climbing outside of these months during the off-season is possible for each trek, and a small minority of travelers do undertake this each year. You have the advantage of less crowds, however, fewer people go during this time for good reason. On Mount Kilimanjaro, April, May, and November in particular can be very wet with poor visibility, making for a pretty unpleasant hiking experience. And in Nepal, the summer monsoon and the coldest winter months can be very unpredictable and even dangerous, with heavy rains from June to August and bitter cold and the risk of blizzards in January and early February. In an ideal world, our availability to travel should not trump our preference and choice. But we know that for some of you out there, this just isn't the case. For those who can only travel at certain times, constrained by work, study, or family life, this question of seasonality could be the deciding factor. So study the seasons carefully and make sure you're planning to visit at the right time of year. Cost. Which trek is more expensive? In short, Mount Kilimanjaro costs more, even though it's the shorter adventure. Why? Because you cannot climb Kilimanjaro without a large mountain crew assisting you. The Tanzania authorities wish to keep Mount Kilimanjaro as untouched as possible, so everything that you need to survive while climbing the mountain has to be hauled up with you. This requires a serious amount of supplies and equipment to last over many, many days. It's a very complex operation, and in turn requires a large team of porters, guides, and cooks. In fact, for every single climber, you can expect around 5 mountain crew in support. So the wages of the team and the cost of all of this specialized camping and safety equipment is ultimately what makes Kilimanjaro the more expensive endeavor. On the Everest Base Camp Trek, on the other hand, expeditions manage with far fewer guides and porters, since you eat, rest, and sleep in tea houses. The accommodation and food are relatively cheap too in Nepal, with lots of choice along the trail. So yes, all in all, you will likely spend $1,000 or more on a Mount Kilimanjaro trek, excluding international flights. For some people, this will ultimately make the difference. But unless your budget is very tight, we advise that you focus on picking the trek that is right for you. Just getting to and from Nepal or Tanzania will likely cost you thousands of dollars and several days of travel. And for many people out there, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and experience. So keep things in perspective. If you travel with Follow Alice, the maths becomes far simpler because you only have 3 main outlays: your international flights, any trekking gear that you need, and your Follow Alice fee. The rest is taken care of, and you never need to worry about a thing. Our final recommendations. So which trek should you ultimately choose? Well, for most people, you really can't go wrong with either one, and we really do mean it. They're both out of this world, and hopefully you'll get the chance to experience both one day. But we realize that you all seek clear answers and guidance, and there are a few specific instances where we think you could make a good argument for one over the other. Let's begin by sharing some recommendations in favor of the Everest Base Camp Trek. Does the idea of experiencing local culture during your hike excite you as much as the mountains and the challenge of the trek? For culture junkies with this priority in mind, the Everest Base Camp Trek is a clear winner. Mount Kilimanjaro simply cannot offer this cultural element to your experience. Ditto for anyone running on a very tight budget. The Everest Base Camp Trek is cheaper by around $1,000 or more. It also has more flexibility and room to cut costs. In an ideal world, money wouldn't be a constraint, but we understand that it often can be. And finally, a no-brainer. But if camping is just not your cup of tea, then Nepal and the tea house experience will be more comfortable and better suited to you. Some people simply don't like camping, and that's fine. Okay, what kind of people do we think will be better suited to Kilimanjaro? Mount Kilimanjaro is the most accessible of the world's 7 summits, the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents. We think that Mount Kilimanjaro would appeal more to those seeking to push their boundaries just a little further and could better satisfy that pursuit of adrenaline and thirst for a challenge. Or perhaps you crave a detox from the lights, noise, and stresses of modern life. You want to disconnect from the world and reconnect with nature and simple outdoor living, with nothing but the mountain air, whisper of the wind, and the moon above you. Mount Kilimanjaro offers complete escapism and would be a perfect match for you. For all else, you really cannot go wrong with either, as we said. So there you have it. Are you aware that Follow Alice organizes trips to Mount Kilimanjaro and the Everest Base Camp Trek? Since 2014, we have taken thousands of happy travelers to many of the world's most exciting destinations, including these 2 beauties. We're extremely proud of the service we offer and grateful for the excellent feedback that we continue to receive. If you're up for the adventure, feel free to check out our website link in the description to take a peek at our departure dates and itineraries. And if you like, our friendly team are always on hand to discuss and offer their advice and expertise for a trip. We're here to help. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more content like this one. Thanks very much everyone, and safe travels.